Chapter 5. Ibrahim Nihar was playing hide and seek with her 5-year-old son. She knew he was under the bed, but she pretended not to know. She continuously called his name. Hasib was busy in the kitchen, smiling at Ibrahim. Melissa was taking a rest in the guest room. "Caught you, Mama." Ibrahim giggled and hugged her from the back. She laughed, carried him with love, kissed him, and said now it's time for bed. She looked at Hasibi. Hasibi nodded her head, turned off the lights of the lounge, and moved towards their rooms. Everlast's cottage was not very big. It had 3 spacious and furnished rooms on the ground floor, including a well-furnished drawing room and a lounge. The main entrance led into a spacious hallway with smooth tiled flooring and soft lighting. This hallway provided access to all the main rooms on the floor. A large lounge with big windows that let in plenty of natural light. The room was furnished with cozy sofas, a dining table, and a TV. The walls were painted in neutral tones, creating a warm and inviting atmosphere. Adjacent to the lounge, there was a kitchen, modern and well-equipped, featuring stainless steel appliances and ample counter space. The cabinetry was sleek and contemporary, with a mix of closed cupboards and open shelves. The master bedroom was, with a large window overlooking the garden that was at the backside of the house. The second bedroom was in the use of Hasibi. The third room was used as a guest room. The staircase was along with the kitchen that led to the only room on the first floor, which was Ahmad Hayes' study room cum office. The best thing about this house was the garden, which was located at the backside of the house and interconnected with the kitchen. The garden was surrounded by beautifully arranged flower beds filled with a variety of seasonal flowers and perennial plants. On one side of the garden, there was a dedicated vegetable patch that Nihar and Hasibi planted. There was a dedicated play area with a swing set, sandbox or small playhouse. That was the small heaven of Nihar and Ahmet. Ahmet and Paul were out of the city in search of the drug dealer who recently shot his 5 men and fled. They had information about the whereabouts of him. That's why Melissa was staying at Nihar's house. She was pregnant and Paul was worried about leaving her all alone at home after the recent encounter with the gangsters in the car. The shooting had injured Paul's right hand, but he was recovering now, and due to the danger he didn't want to leave Melissa alone behind him. They studied the forensic report that indicated that the death was caused by the excess of fentanyl, but the question was why he had shot them. It was a dense forest. Paul had been running for 30 minutes and searching his way, but couldn't find Ahmet. He was panting, stumbled, but didn't stop. He saw a meandering river. He stopped, trying to catch his breath. He was standing there, puzzled about where to go to find him. He was lost. Paul bent down and washed his face and tried to clean the blood stain from his clothes. He thought for a while and walked slowly with the river. Promptly he froze. He was surrounded by gunmen. There were 10. He looked around and tried to find a way to escape, but was useless. His smouldering eyes were gazing at the man who was ready to shoot him. The gunman pushed him with his gun. He unwillingly moved with them. His eyes were keenly observing the track. The rustling of leaves, hooting of owls, and howling from far away made the forest spine-chilling. They brought him after a man. Paul recognized him. He was the one they were searching for. Paul tightly closed his lips and flinched. Finally, "Out from your hideout." "You really thought you could catch me?" the gangster sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. The gunmen closed in, weapons trained on Paul, their faces unreadable. One of the gunmen smirked, raising his gun, but Paul was faster. With a swift motion, he drew his weapon and fired. The shot echoed, a deafening sound that shattered the night. The first gunman went down, clutching his shoulder as he collapsed to the ground. Chaos erupted. The remaining gunman, from his back, opened fire. Pain exploded through Paul's side, and he staggered, his hand clutching at his wound. Paul ducked behind a small table, gritting his teeth against the pain. He returned fire, taking down another gunman. The gangster, caught in the crossfire, cursed and dove for cover, his bravado vanishing instantly. Paul moved with precision, years of training kicking in. He took down a 3rd gunman, his eyes cold and determined, but the numbers were against him. The remaining gunman managed to flank him, his gun aimed directly at Paul's chest. As the fighting raged on, a figure emerged from the darkness, moving with purpose and precision. He moved silently, like a spectre blending into the chaos. Paul, struggling against the pain and the onslaught of gunfire, barely noticed the arrival until it was too late. With a swift, practiced motion, the figure grabbed a discarded pipe from the ground and swung it with lethal accuracy, catching one of the gunmen off guard. The gunman crumpled, his weapon skidding across the pavement. The newcomer wasted no time, expertly dispatching another gunman with a series of precise, powerful strikes. Paul's attention was briefly diverted by the unexpected assistance. He saw the figure's dark eyes glinting with determination as they took down the last gunman. The figure's movements were fluid and controlled, betraying years of training. Paul looked at the figure and took a sigh of relief and said while aiming the gangster, "Finally, where were you, damn it?" The moment Ahmet stepped away, the gangster made his move. With a sudden, violent motion, he grabbed a hidden weapon, an untraceable, lightweight knife tucked into his suit. He lunged at Paul, the blade glinting dangerously in the dim light. He was off-guarded and weak. The pain and exhaustion slowed him down. The gangster's knife found its mark, slashing across his abdomen, the sound of shock and pain escaping from his lips. Ahmet turned with fear. It was too late to realize what had happened. Paul's hands loosened on the gun, body collapsed to the ground, and blood was pooling around him. "You were so close," he sneered. "But close isn't enough," gangster said with a cruel smile on his face. Ahmet reached Paul's side. His face was a mix of anger and helplessness. He knelt beside him, trying to staunch the bleeding with what he had, but it was clear that time was running out. The gangster, looking at his futile attempt, took a step back. He was trying to flee, but Ahmet took Paul's gun and shot the gangster. Blood gushed out from his back. The gangster's eyes widened in shock and disbelief. He staggered, his hands dropping the knife, his mouth opening in a silent scream. He fell and became lifeless. Ahmet, his hands stained with blood, looked down at his dearest friend with a mix of guilt and sorrow, knowing he had arrived too late to save him. He arrived at Everlast. Everyone was at the dining table having breakfast. Ibram looked at him and left his seat, running towards him and grasping his legs with love. Nihar was scared with the expression on his face and didn't have the courage to ask any questions. Melissa somehow managed to stand and only ask, "Where is Paul?" Now it was Ahmet's turn to be scared. The courage he gathered the whole time to face Melissa vanished after looking at her face. "Where is Paul?" Melissa repeated her question. She didn't want Ahmet to answer, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. The atmosphere was tense, the air heavy with unspoken questions, and the gravity of what was about to be revealed. Ahmet's eyes were cast downward, unable to see the gazes of Melissa. He cleared his throat and said, "Sorry, Melissa, we lost Paul." Her face drained of colour, the shock rendering her features ashen. Her normally vibrant eyes were now dull, clouded with a haze of unshed tears and overwhelming grief. As the full impact of the announcement hit her, her body began to betray her. The room seemed to spin, and a wave of dizziness washed over her, making her feel unsteady and disoriented. Without warning, her legs gave way. The fainting spell was sudden and complete, as if her entire being was unable to bear the weight of the news. Nihar hurried to her aid, but she had lost her complete senses.